Hello and welcome. Today we'll take a look at a Blade Dance Assassin focusing on the skill Venom and scaling it as high as we possibly can. This build has over 1600 life without Battle Cry. It also is curse immune and does a ton of physical and poison damage, meaning we do not have to worry about physical immunes. Venom allows us to scale really well, as you can see by the 25k stat damage there, based on our 8k poison over 0.4 seconds. Now, the stat sheet is a little bit of a lie, but the damage, as you can see from one-shotting mobs in tier 3 maps, is still really strong. It really takes off when we take advantage of the ability to pre-buff Venom. So we dump all 20 points into Venom and its synergy Cobra Strike. This is the most important part of our build, and when Venom drops off, you will notice a huge decrease in your damage. Now we also want to dump our points into Claw and Dagger Mastery, as that gives us very needed attack rating, which we will be thirsty for considering we get none from our charms. The other core skills are 1 point in Tiger Strike, which increases our AoE range on Whirlwind, as well as a point in Dragonflight for mobility, and 1 point into Blade Shield, mostly to help us proc, but also to give us a little bit of leech. We have a ton of extra points after this, which can be put in a lot of different places. You want to put some of your points into either Burst of Speed or Fade, depending on which one you want to run. My character will be running Fade for Curse Immunity, but there are ways to do that with Burst of Speed as well. I will be using a shield, so I do not put extra points into Claw Block, but you could use 2 claws, and then Claw Block would be a great place to put them. You can also put them into Cloak of Shadows as a space for you to provide a little bit more survivability if you're finding yourself getting killed by archers. I dumped mine into Shadow Master just for shits and giggles. For our stat points, same as usual, you want just enough in strength and dexterity for your gear. Dexterity does help us with block as well as attack rating, which we need a lot more of, so you can put some extra points there if you want, but the rest in vitality. Now here is the key to this build. We pre-buff Venom. To do this, we want as many plus skills and plus shadow discipline skills as possible, as well as much plus poison skill damage as we can get our hands on. As you can see here, I'm using 2 3 open socket shadow killers, a 3 open socket helm, plus 3 shadow amulet, a bramble, a really shitty 31% bramble, that's an obvious place of improvement, plus 2 shadow dancers, arachnid mesh, 2 skill rings, torch annihilus, and then the key to this build is actually the fact that we now have access to 4% poison large charms. By filling our inventory with these large charms, we are able to double dip our poison damage from Venom. This means it applies both when we cast Venom, but also when we then strike using Venom. Now, the equation for this is really interesting. It'll take our skill level for Venom and multiply it by that mastery bonus from our large charms and gear, and then apply that mastery bonus a second time. So the first time we really just want to focus on plus skills and plus poison damage. The next time for our gear, we want to really add in those facets with minus poison resistance. That will give us the largest damage increase. Now what you're seeing here is that our Venom has been snapshotted, meaning our stat sheet shows changes only when we pick up anything that gives us plus poison damage, because it's applying that second time. If we remove things with plus skills, it doesn't change our poison damage at all. Next, we'll take a look at the pre-buff process, which only takes about 15 seconds. Once we've cast our 3 spells, we simply switch out all of our gear that we need and dump the extras in the cube. Now, I won't change my gloves in many situations, continuing to use Venom grips, they're really strong, and if I happen to have the proper Shadow Dancers, I would just leave those on instead of Gores or War Travs or any other boots. We have a lot of chest options here, depending on if you want to do more physical damage or if you want to do more poison damage. I recommend a bit of a hybrid build because there are poison immunes on every single map. So what I'll show when we start getting to some maps is building specifically to deal with the poison immune, high physical resistance mobs, generally undead. The main objectives with our gear are to boost our poison damage while also giving us some survivability. Our damage is going to be really high, so adding those facets allows us to shatter everything that is not poison immune, and the Headhunter's Glory here is just phenomenally good for us. It gives us our movement speed, it gives us attack rating, it gives us 3 sockets to put facets in already. You'll notice the majority of my gear isn't even corrupted yet. There's a lot of room for growth. You can use an Atmos Scarab if you use 2 claws. One problem with that is you run into AR issues. So a solution to that problem is to run dual Angelic Ring and Amulet. That gives us a ton of attack rating. Gloves are one of the most fluid places. Venom grips are the highest poison damage, but you can change them up to Soul Drainers who do more physical damage and give you some Mana Leech, which we don't have elsewhere, or use Grave Palm for Undead or Laying of Hands for Demons. Now with the Merc, we have a couple of different setups that can work pretty well. One is an Act 1 Pus Spitter Merc. You want to provide a lot of survivability to this Merc. I found that she died all the time. That'll do the most poison damage, but was also hard to keep alive. This is my Merc of choice, an Act 2 Pride Merc. It gives us that concentration aura, and thanks to Defiance, he stays alive all the time. Another new addition is the Whirlwind Merc. This is a great option as well, especially on a budget, because you can get amp damage from there and another curse. So here is our first setup. I mentioned that there are a lot of undeads with high physical resistance that are poison immune. One solution to this problem is to run Heavenly Garb. This gives us Sanctuary Aura, which will completely negate their physical resistance. Now for everything else, we can provide as much poison penetration as possible using a Plague Claw, which gives us lower resist when struck. So pairing these two things together allows us to run some of those maps that have those undead mobs that are otherwise tricky to kill because of their poison immunity. With this setup, we can really go straight through this map, no problem, just like it's a tier 1, even with a high density, but this map's density sucks anyway, so I wouldn't recommend running it, even though it's really good for us on paper. The next option here has another undead mob that causes some problems due to its poison resistance and high physical immunity, so we use the same setup, and Phlegethon is actually pretty good. What I would suggest though is to not try and full clear the map. It's a really long, big map. If you just hug the walls and follow the path, you keep a lot of tight corridors, and it works really well for Whirlwind. Our next gear option is using a Fortitude at Headhunter's Glory. This is very similar to a standard Whirlwind physical build, but instead of putting ED jewels into our gear, into our sockets, we want to put poison facets. Now, find as many 5-4 or 4-5 poison facets as you can and dump them in there, and you'll start doing a ton of damage. I recommend this setup for anywhere where there are beast mobs or a low number of undead and demon mobs. As you can see, storm right through. I got lucky enough to get a little bit of a speed boost shrine here, which just made it even more fun to go through. A new map, Shadows of Westmarch, has no poison immunes. This is fantastic. What it does have is some very high physical resistant mobs, and makes it a little bit challenging for pure physical damage builds to deal with. But with our high level of poison damage, we can go straight through this map, and it makes it a great choice for this build. The third setup here is using a rare crafted chest. Now, this is what I've been using for the majority of the season, and I find it works really well. The problem with Fortitude is it doesn't have any space for sockets, so we can't add facets. Those facets do add a ton of poison damage, and this gives us a chance to balance our physical damage and our poison damage to maximize the weaknesses of whatever mob we are hitting. This functions very similar to Ethereal's Might, except we can also do beast maps, like Blood Moon. Our endgame option is really going for a Tyrael's Might. This gives us the benefit of huge amount of move speed while keeping consistent damage to demons and undead, and gives us those sockets to put those facets in. This is absolutely a luxury item. It's not required to make the build work, but it does shave a couple of minutes off our clear time, and it just feels really good. We started this with River of Blood, and we will end it with River of Blood, but in this case we'll end it with a really juicy 64% max HP River of Blood. This is the best map for us by far. There are no poison immunes in it. Our poison damage does an insane amount to every single mob. You could run Heavenly Garb if you wanted to here as well. You could run Grave Palm. There are a lot of undeads. There's a lot of demons. You do a metric shit ton of damage to everything in this map, allowing you to juice it as much as you want. Throw your standard of heroes on here, go nuts. You can demolish this map. It'll take 10 to 12 minutes, even with 50% increased mob life. You can run literally any map with this build, especially ones that have physical immunes, because physical immunes tend to have almost no life. So if you're doing any poison damage to them, you will completely destroy them. This means Pandemonium Citadel is fantastic for us. Fall of Chaldeum is great. Ancestral Trial is even wonderful. Lost Temple is fantastic. I would stay away from two maps though. I would not run Canyon of Sescheron. These Soul Killers are poison immune and they are just spread out all over the place. It sucks. And the other one that I would not run is Khejistan Marketplace, because those fire turrets are infinitely poison resistant and they are terrible. They will destroy us if you try to whirlwind through them, so stay clear of those two maps and you'll do just fine. Thank you for taking the time to watch. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments or pop into Discord and ask away.